The interesting thing for Asia is the sheer scale of Australia. So there's an amazing amount of work to do to convert from a predominantly coal-fired power supply, electricity supply framework to one that is driven by renewables. Certainly in Japan and Korea, where I've been, there is a lot of concern around energy security. Generally, they don't have a tremendous amount of natural resources, and things like Ukraine are just, have been exacerbating that for all of us. Concern about having energy security. What Australia might offer is the opportunity to have very large-scale, renewables-driven hydrogen processing plants where they can effectively create hydrogen, export it up to Japan and Korea, and then that can be a fuel source for the future. The other is around food security. So there's clearly a very expanding population in Asia. And again, Australia has a huge amount of land mass, and using renewable energy to perhaps help desalinization of water, or just using the power generated from renewable energy to create a massive food bowl across areas of Australia that aren't currently being utilised. Could create a food basket for export up to Asia. And then you might just have straightforward power export up through interconnectors, although we shouldn't underestimate the challenges of laying cables across hundreds or thousands of miles of ocean floor.
Is it hard to bring people on board with this? Is the scale up a problem?
The technology in much of hydrogen exists. Part of the problem is it's actually very inefficient. So the amount of wasted electricity in terms of conversion for what you get out in hydrogen is pretty low. But in a world where the sun is producing a limitless amount of electricity, maybe that works. You also have problems around the fact that the sun only shines during the day, or the wind only blows at different times of the day. So you've got an intermittency on your production, which is not terribly efficient. So there's some work around how do you optimize when hydrogen is being produced, and how do you link that in with an intermittent energy source. Then there's technology around how you actually use hydrogen. I'm not an expert on this, but I do know hydrogen's highly explosive, and it's quite tricky to transport. So there have been recent hydrogen container vessels which have shipped hydrogen from Australia up into Japan, but it's really quite experimental technology. And then you've got at the other end of it, how do you actually utilize it? How do you get hydrogen into all of the places you need? Human rights is an interesting thing in Australia. So I don't purport to be an expert on this, but our team work very closely with the Indigenous people of Australia, and we have effectively a joint venture, an organisation called Desert Springs Octopus, which is a collaboration between us and a representative body of Northern Australian Indigenous communities who have rights over vast tracts of land. And we're trying to find a way to work with them that builds value for those communities, not in the way that sort of comes in and bungs, a renewable plant down and pays a lease for the land. Actually help generate proper infrastructure that people are working on, create communities, create community ownership in there, perhaps try and develop renewables alongside other social infrastructure up there, like healthcare and education and so on. So that's a project we've been working on for probably 18 months, maybe 2 years. It's slow to emerge, but its potential is enormous. If we can find a model that works for everyone and is sensitive to the way the indigenous communities look at interacting with sort of financial services sector,